slash a floater slash everything else. So all of the above. So Lisa, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Rami. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see you all. It's nice to see some familiar faces. This was the church that my family and I used to go to a long time ago, before it was here in Roseville. My family and I immigrated to the United States back in 1982, and we lived in Connecticut for a few years, and then in 1989 we moved to California. At the time, there were only 2 Coptic churches in the area in Northern California. There was St. Mary's in Sacramento, St. Antonius in Hayward. And my family and I lived in Stockton, about an hour away from each. So we would frequently come to St. Mary's. It feels like home whenever I come here. I'm very happy to be here with you today, and also to see some familiar faces. So I was asked to come and speak about the prophet Jonah, because we're coming up on what? The fast of Jonah. And I know we all know the story of Jonah, but I would like to take it from a different angle. Mainly, how can we look at this story through the eyes of being a servant and through the eyes of service? And what's applicable about this story that can maybe help us today? Raise your hand if you have ever felt reluctant in service. Raise your hand, and this is a judgment-free zone. We're all friends here. I see someone raising their hand up high in the back. Hello, come on in. If you have ever felt discouraged, if you have ever felt reluctant, if you have ever felt frustrated, and I'm going to try to not walk right in front of the camera. I don't need to be on camera. If you've ever felt, God, why? Why and why me? Then hopefully my hope and my prayer is that we can take heart and maybe a little bit of courage. Rami was really kind to introduce me as a middle school servant, an on-call servant, a go-wherever servant. But the truth is, I have been trying to run away from service now for 22 years. And that was what I also shared at the youth retreat. Yep. So I don't believe in coincidences. I think sometimes God selects a topic for a reason. This was not the intended topic for today, but it became the topic. So I'm speaking to myself first and foremost before I'm speaking to anyone here. Now, we all know the story of Jonah, right? You remember the story when we were kids, we all learned. So Jonah was what? Who was he? He was a prophet. And he was told to go to where? Nineveh. And it's really interesting that the book of Jonah starts with a commandment. So the Lord's word comes to Jonah, and he's given a very clear commandment. Arise, get up. This is your call. This is your wake-up call. Get up now from where you are seated. I need you to go to Nineveh, cry out against it. And why? Why was God insisting that Jonah go to Nineveh? Because of what? Because of their sin. Does anyone here know what kind of sins they were doing?
They have talked about it in his book. He mentioned that because that city did not return back. I mean, or they went back to their idolatry, so they have breached them after that.
Yeah.
So they were idolatry, prostitution, evil works, cruelty and wars.
They were cruel, they were idolatrous, evil and wickedness left and right. Nineveh was the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and at the time they were an enemy nation to Israel. So they were also known, they had a reputation of being very brutal. When they would capture their soldiers, they would gouge out their eyes, the enemy soldiers, or if they would capture men, women, children from the nations that they're conquering, they would cut off their feet and do all kinds of horrible things. So they were brutal, they were wicked. You mentioned prostitution, I want you to think of every bad thing that you can think of that was happening in the city. They were powerful, and God says to Jonah, go there. That's where I want you to go. Now what happened next? What happened next? He took a ship to Tarshish. So Jonah was right here in Joppa, and Joppa was a port city. And he decided to hop on a boat, and instead of going to Nineveh this way, he goes in the direct opposite direction to the very tip of Spain. Was God's commandment confusing?
I mean, for him it might have been confusing. Why do you want me to go over there?
Yeah. God, are you sure? Did I hear you right? Did you say Nineveh? But it sounded like God was pretty clear. And he runs. Now I'd like to pause there for just a second. I had shared my story with the youth about my trying to run away several times, so I won't reshare that here. But if we can take a moment of reflection and think, has there ever been a time you are asked to do something and your instinct was to run in the opposite direction? So just so I can get a better feel, I'm going to go around and ask what kind of service you do. Is that okay? And if you don't want to share, you don't have to share, but what kind of service are you involved in?
I help with youth fundraising, and I'm also a 4th grade Sunday school teacher.
Youth fundraising and 4th grade Sunday school teacher. Has there ever been a time where you felt like, I don't know if I want to do this?
I think for sure.
I think for sure.
I don't think I ever tried to run away physically, but I'm trying to ignore,
right.
Put my phone down. I don't know if I want to do that.
Right. You just, you know what? I will respond to this text message later. I'm just going to put it down and walk away. How about someone from the back? A brave soul, raise your hand and tell me what kind of service you do. And if you've ever, you don't have to describe details, but has there ever been a time in your life where you wanted to turn away?
I can share.
Sure.
I'm a Sunday school teacher and coordinator for more than 30 years. So I started when I was 17. So it's been times when I was confused. Is it God's sounds or somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Or I just discussed why. But I don't think I remember I ran away. Either I'm confused about the sound, so I give myself time to confirm and ensuring that it's God's sound.
Mm-hmm.
Or and ask around for sure,
Yeah.
ask people.
Yeah.
Or I take time to ask back why.
Mm-hmm.
I was before in some services that I was like, okay, I'm gonna say yes, and I will do it as is, as God's asking me. It's God's call,
Mm-hmm.
and it took some peace from me, and I didn't feel like I'm serving. I didn't feel like I'm like it's more.
Being stumbled.
Yeah, being
Like a
stumbled.
stumbling
So I don't believe that God's service should give us stumbling. It should give us peace and give us to be powerful and helping others. So this is time when, is it God is not? Is it, should I obey 100% all the time, or should I talk back? This is my experience.
And thank you so much for sharing, and those are all excellent questions. So whether we've been in the service for 1 year, 50 years, any amount of time, and even if you don't consider yourself a servant, no matter where you are along those lines, you're asking very good questions. If I'm asked to do something, is this God's voice I'm hearing, first of all? And how do you discern God's will versus your will or the will of so-and-so? So you spent time, you were praying about it, you were seeking wise counsel from those around you, and it's not easy. I wish service came with a clear roadmap. And you said you didn't run away, but there are times that you hesitated. And there's nothing wrong with taking some time out to pray and reflect and contemplate. So I want us to have that in the back of our mind as we continue on with Jonah's story. So God was very clear. Go here, speak to these people, because their wickedness has come up against me. And Jonah, the prophet, I don't know much about Jonah's life other than he's the son of Amittai, which by the way means truth in Hebrew. So I don't know much about his life beforehand, but he's a prophet, so I'm assuming that he has probably had some experience with God or hearing the Lord's voice. So he hears the clear instructions and he says, no, and I'm going to go this way. His story is filled with irony. I don't know how to say irony in Arabic. How do you say that? Sokhreya? So there's lots of sokhreyas here.
How do you type your sokhreya in Arabic?
So,
Sokhreya is sarcasm.
oh, no, yeah.
So irony is more of the
As long as we're all on the same page, there's lots of ironies in the story. Can someone give me an irony in the book of Jonah? It's ironic. It's completely unbelievable. You're reading the story and you're like, what?
The whale.
The
whale.
The whale. The whale. So he's on a ship boarded to Tarshish in the opposite direction. He's supposed to go to Nineveh. And then a big fish comes out of nowhere and swallows him. That's not a normal everyday occurrence. That's an example of an irony. What else is ironic about the story?
Yeah, he could have not told them the reason why the waves are so high, and he could have just continued on.
He could have just kept silent. He could have just kept sleeping. When we don't walk in accordance to God's will, sometimes certain events will come that seem strange, weird, unexpected, almost as if God is saying, wake up, I told you to go here. I'm going to put this traffic light here. I'm going to have this person call you there. Can we think of any that maybe have happened in our life of service? That's just a question to reflect on. You don't have to answer that out loud. When we force our will instead of accepting God's will, our God is so loving and merciful that certain events may happen to try to get us to course correct. I told you to go to Nineveh. We know that certain things don't happen without the hand of God behind it. So that's another thing that I often think about in terms of service. If we're coming to God honestly and saying, God, not my will, fine, but yours. And certain things begin to happen. We might not understand why in the moment. Things actually might look like a punishment, when in fact, it might actually be for our good. Romans 8:28 is one of my favorite verses. The fish, the big fish, the whale, was not a punishment for Jonah. It was his shelter. But when we're in the moment, sometimes we're not able to see that. It wasn't the place where he came to die. He could have died. There were so many times he could have died in this story. He could have died with the horrible storm that was coming along in the sea. When the sailors tossed him overboard, he could have died. A big fish swallowed him up. He wasn't food for the fish. He could have died. Nineveh, this horrible, evil city, he's a prophet. He's not a soldier. He's not coming there armed. They could have killed him. There's so many times he could have died. But he was kept safe all along his journey. In the fish, in the belly of the whale, he blessed God. And he had a moment of clarity to see that the unseen uses the seen to help you along your way.
Say that again, please.
The unseen, so he couldn't physically see the hand of God, but God is the one that's doing things in the world that are actually helping Jonah trust in him. So we might not see God's hand, but we know that our flight made it safely, thank God. We might not see what's behind it, but we know for whatever reason that freeway's closed. We're not meant to go that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There are things that happen in our world that we can't always see or know the reason behind it, but it's for our benefit. So Jonah trusts. And that's the end of the story, right? He comes out. So he's like, fine, God, out of the depths of Sheol, I cried to you when my soul fainted in me, and thank you, Lord, etc., etc. And then the fish spits him out in Nineveh. And he's happy, and that's the end, right? No, what happens next? What happens next? What happens?
He went to Nineveh and he preached.
He went to Nineveh and he preached. And he was happy.
No, he wasn't happy.
No. He went to Nineveh and he preached. Well, another thing that is helpful to remember no matter what service we do is God's mercy and patience are endless. Who did God have mercy on in this story?
The sailors.
The sailors. God had mercy on the sailors. Oh, but they're not even the main characters in the story. Why did you bring them up?
Because Jonah ironically served them in his disservice. Like when he was disservicing himself, he served them too because they saw him believe.
So let's pause there for a second. So when Jonah said, "Sorry, Lord, you told me to go here. I'm going to willfully defy you go on a ship in the exact opposite direction, and then I'm just gonna sleep so no one can talk to me. That was still an opportunity to serve. Our service goes with us wherever we go. It extends beyond the walls of whatever Sunday school classroom, or the kitchen, or the bookstore, or whatever physical place that you serve. God had mercy on the sailors, and we're going to get to them in a little bit. He had also mercy on who?
On him.
God had mercy on him, on Jonah. Yes, God had mercy on him because of his disobedience. He sent the whale, the big fish, and after the fish spit him out, God said, you disobeyed me. That's it. I'm sending another prophet. You're no good. You're fired. He came to him again and said, now go to Nineveh and preach. So he had mercy on him. Who else did God have mercy on in the story? The people of Nineveh. We know that God has no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but we ask that the wicked turn away from his way and live. So God's mercy should inspire us, right? To be equally kind and loving and merciful. And that's exactly what happened with Jonah, right? He said, you're right, God. I'm going to go preach to the Ninevites. Please, God, have mercy on them. Is that what he did? No. What did he do? He wanted what?
He wanted to prove his point that nothing would change.
He wanted to prove his point. He said one sentence to them. He walked, and the city was a 3-day walk. He enters in from the east. He said one sentence to them, yet 40 days, and the city will be destroyed. Yet 40 days, and the city will be destroyed. He said one sentence to them, and these wicked, evil, adulterous, idolatrous, every bad sin people did what? They repented. So Jonah should have been happy, right? But he wasn't. He wasn't, because God did not destroy them. I have children of my own. I love children, so please take what I say next. Not in a bad way, but have you ever sometimes been frustrated with some of your youth in service, maybe?
Have we?
No, never.
Come on.
And maybe not you.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not. I mean, frustration knows no age, so maybe not just youth. Have you ever just been frustrated with those to whom you are serving? Jonah was frustrated too because God did not destroy them. And he said, oh, Lord, was this not what I said when I was still in my country? Therefore I fled previously to Tarshish. That's why I left. For I know that you are a gracious and merciful God, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, one who relents from doing harm. Why didn't you just punish them? He was angry. The lesson Jonah needed to learn is that God's love extends to all of us. The same way that God showed us mercy, we need to be showing mercy to others. It's easy to look at someone who you're serving, especially if they're lost. It's easy to look at them and say, I don't know what I'm going to do with this kid. Their life is a complete mess. And it could be maybe their home life is messy, or maybe there's problems at school, or there's what, and it's easy to just say, you know what, they brought this upon themselves. They should have known better. They deserve it, or they're a hopeless case. But we don't know what God has in store for that person's future. We don't know that maybe you have come for such a time as this, like it says in the book of Esther. Maybe you were meant to cross paths with this person. You are seeing them now when they're present, but you have no idea what seeds you could be planting that will happen in the future that you might not even see. In Joppa, the port city, interestingly enough, we come back to it in the New Testament, where in the book of Acts, St. Peter, that was where he saw his vision of the clean and unclean animals, and what God has cleansed you shall not call common. And this is where Peter understands that, oh wow, in truth I perceive that God does not show partiality. He meets Cornelius, and in the book of Acts chapter 10, verse 35, he says, "But in every nation, whoever fears him and works righteousness is accepted by him." So here St. Peter learns God's mercy is for all human beings. In Joppa, where Jonah chose to run because he didn't want to serve that enemy nation. But we serve a God of second chances. And when the fish spit out Jonah onto Nineveh, we read in Jonah 3:1 that God came to him again. He came to him again. And then Jonah reluctantly but obediently went and said his one sentence. Who is more righteous here? Who's more righteous? The people of Nineveh? The mariners? Well, the sailors, we'll get to them. We'll get to them also a little bit later. It's easy to point the finger at one who's already been labeled as bad. And it's easy to want to excuse yourself for perhaps doing something very similar. So we have to be careful who we're pointing the finger at. The Ninevites were given one sentence. Yet 40 days, Nineveh's going to be overthrown, and they repented. And we see this later in the Gospel of St. Matthew, where Christ is saying, the men of Nineveh will rise up in the judgment with this generation and condemn it because they repented at the preaching of Jonah. And indeed, a greater than Jonah is here. There are all kinds of circumstances. I know some of you in this room personally, I don't know all of you, but I know that there are all kinds of circumstances that have led people to serve. But the truth is, we are probably being served the most through service. We're the ones learning, we're the ones growing, we're the ones that need to hear the message. And to serve implies a certain level of obedience. And what we want to obey is aligning our will to God's will. Jonah's vision was not God's vision. God wanted those people to be saved. Jonah wanted them to be destroyed. And when we see someone who's lost, it's easy for us to fall into that snare, that trap of self-righteousness or pride. And we see this because Jonah got a second chance. He didn't want them to get a second chance. So just some reflection questions. You don't have to answer this out loud. Are there any ways that we could be resisting God's will? Are there any areas that we maybe are stubborn or self-righteous? Why can't I be angry though? Isn't it right for me to be angry? Chapter 4 of Jonah, when you read it, Jonah kind of sounds like what to you?
An angry child.
An
An angry child.
angry child. Exactly.
Sulking.
Sulking. A sulking, angry child. It displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he became angry at God's kindness. And he even said, Jonah, who could have died in the storm, he could have come across some mariners, some sailors who were not kind. They could have killed him. They could have tossed him over. He could have died in the waters. He could have died in the belly of the fish. He could have died when he went to Nineveh. But instead, he's asking for death. God, you are so kind and loving. Please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. It's a little dramatic, don't you think? To me, I'm reminded of my children when they were little having a temper tantrum. And God, as the loving Father, is it right for you to be angry? Is it right for you to be angry? I know you don't want to do this. I know you had this idea for the festival and instead they went with that idea. I know you wanted this breakfast item, but instead people opted for that breakfast item. I know you wanted to do Sunday school this way, but the kids didn't listen to you and instead they did that. I know you want, but is it right for you to be angry? And Jonah needed to learn a lesson. So something really strange happens now at the end of the book of Jonah. He goes out of the city, he sits on the east side, he made himself a shelter, and then what strange thing are we reading about? Do you remember how the story ends? Yeah, exactly, the tree, the plant. So God prepared a plant, and it grew, and it gave him shade. And then the next day, it died. God sent a worm that ate the plant. And then Jonah wished death for himself again. It's better for me to die than to live. I lost the plant that gave me shade. And then God asks him again, is it right for you to be angry about the plant? Jonah, is it right for you to be angry about the plant? And then Jonah says what? Yes, it is. It's right for me to be angry, even unto death. And God sums it up by saying, you took pity on this plant that's been here for less than 24 hours. And should I not pity Nineveh, the great city, in which there are more than 120,000 persons who can't discern their right hand from their left? What's God trying to teach us here? Mercy. To be merciful. To be merciful. These people, yes, they're evil. Yes, they're adulterous. Yes, they're idolatrous. Yes, they're every bad thing you can think of. We need to have pity on them. They can't discern their right hand from their left. What does that mean?
You don't know any better.
They don't know any better. Come on. Really? They don't know any better? I mean, it's not like we're living in a day and age where we don't know any better.
Don't you think that that's not true, but that's the way he wants him to look at them?
Do I think that that's not true?
Not true. I mean, they know better, like you said, but maybe God wants Jonah to look at them this way.
Yeah, I think so. I think that God is teaching Jonah and all who would read this book afterwards to look at them this way, and how easy it is to say, you should know better. How would you describe, how much time do we have left in this meeting?
Like 3 hours and a half.
How would you describe America today? That's a loaded question. So let's just think about, okay, what was that again? Idolatrous, adulterous, evil, not knowing, Is it really that hard to know your right hand from your left? Is it really that hard to know right versus wrong
If I'm possessed,
these days?
if I'm giving the devil power over me,
Mhm.
yes, I will not be aware or self-conscious that what's going on. I'm doing the evil work, I'm enjoying it, and I just need a slap on my face to know, like, hey,
You need a
Well,
slap in the face to
yeah.
wake up.
yeah, because it's either dark or light, right?
It's either dark or light. It's either black or white. It's either boy or girl. It should be very binary, shouldn't it? So, sneak peek on what I'm talking about tomorrow in a different church. You should have pity on them because they can't discern their right hand from their left. And we know that the enemy, the devil, comes to do what?
To destroy.
Kill, steal, and destroy. And we know, and I'll get to the furries in a minute, and some of you are laughing because you know what this is. Others of you are like, is that a Halloween costume? Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And it is my opinion that the way this happens in the West is different than how it happens in maybe the Middle East and in Egypt, where persecution looks different here, where instead of physically killing, stealing, destroying, it's more like confusion, spiritual attacks that get to the core of you not even knowing your identity. They can't discern their right from their left. Raise your hand if you serve youth in this church. Kind of? Yeah. Raise your hand if there are youth in your life in any way, shape, or form. Raise your hand if you know any elementary school children. Do you know any elementary school kids?
Yeah.
My Sunday school kids, I had like up to 10.
Last year, when our youngest son was in 4th grade, our son Stephen, he came home. It was the first day of school, and I asked him, Stephen, how was school today? How was your first day? He was like, it was good, but I have homework. And I said, you have homework on the first day? And he pulled out a piece of paper, and I only saw he only answered the first line, and the rest of it was blank. And glancing at it, And I'm like, what happened, Habibi? And he said, Mom, the teacher passed out papers on the first day, getting to know you papers. And the first line said student's name. And then the line after that, preferred name. And then the line after that, preferred pronouns. And then later on, it was your favorite color, favorite food. And he was confused at preferred name. And so he raised his hand and he asked his teacher and he said, oh, like a nickname? Like Steve? And then she's like, any name you want. And he was being sarcastic. Don't know where he gets that from. And he's like, so I could write Natasha? And she said, yeah, you can write Natasha. Do you want us to call you Natasha?
California.
Bay Area. San Ramon, which is a conservative city in the Bay Area. But anyway. And he was so confused and shocked and stunned that he can have any name he wanted. He couldn't fill out the rest of the form. And so he's telling me this after school. And I said, your name is Stephen. You are Stephen Peter Gabriel. And he said, Mom, she said I can have any name. And then I said, you know what, Habibi, you're right. You can have any name. I can have any name too. I've always liked the name Anthony. So I'm gonna go by Anthony now. And I'm sorry, you know, Habibi, I can't pick you up from school anymore because Elizabeth is no longer here. Lisa is no longer here. I'm gonna have to change the paperwork and my driver's license. And he's like, what? And yes, and when we go to back to school night, all the kids and meeting your teacher, they're gonna meet your parents, Peter and Anthony. And the more I went on, he's like, Mom, stop. You're Elizabeth. Yes. But he inherently knew that was wrong. And I said, you're right. I'm Elizabeth, and you are Stephen. And before you were formed in my womb, God knows you. God knew you. And don't let anyone tell you who you are or who you aren't. And I thought that would be the end of that. And then 3 months later, I get a flyer for the Prism Club. Do you guys have one in your elementary schools?
You still had him in the same school?
Still in the same school. I thought, you know, whatever, this is just a one-time incident. So he comes home with a flyer, and the flyer's got a couple of different clubs. There's Playground Pals, and then it was a black and white flyer, interestingly, so I didn't see the rainbow colored. I just saw the triangle, and it said Prism. And I'm like, Prism? What do you think when you think of Prism? Yeah, maybe a color wheel. Yeah, or I think of math, especially when it's black and white. And I'm like, what's this Prism Club? And he said, oh, I don't really know, but it happens during lunchtime, and we don't need parent permission to go to it. And it's a place where like everyone's included or something like that. And I'm like, okay, Habibi, you're not going to that. You could do Playground Pals. And then I went and spoke to the school at this point. The Prism Club, you might know it by its other name, Rainbow Club. The Rainbow Club is the elementary school version of the GSA, Gay Straight Alliance, that are in high schools all over the United States. Rainbow sounds, you know, innocent and happy, but more and more people these days know what the rainbow flag is associated with. So now they're getting creative. They're calling it the Prism Club, and for clubs that are held during lunchtime, parents don't need to know. You don't need parental permission. So I went to the teacher and I said, my son needs permission to join the gardening club, but there's no information on this club. And she's like, yeah, it's just drop in and it's just a safe space for whoever wants to come. And the more I looked into it, the more I found that these clubs are popping up all over. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's the Bay Area. Sorry for you. But it's not like that here. Do you have any kids that go to the Elk Grove Unified School District? Elk Grove, which isn't that far from Sacramento or Roseville. They got creative with their name. It's called UBU. UBU. The UBU Club, where you are free to be you. And you be you. And it was like big on the news last year. The point is, it's becoming harder to ignore attacks on our youth. And even though people should know better. You should know what right and wrong is. You should know what black and white is. You should know what boy and girl is. Now we don't even know animal or human. Someone who knows what a furry is, tell everyone else in the room.
It's people that believe that they are animals.
Yes.
And that they want to be, they want people to talk to them as if I'm like
Exactly.
a wolf.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We laugh. But there are raise your hand if you've seen a furry at your school. Anyone? No? Yes, you have? Okay. Tell me about the furries you've seen.
Stop, guys.
I was actually laughing earlier when you said the Halloween costume.
Yes.
Because, like, me and like a group of other people, like, we're all like youth, so we went to like San Francisco for a day. So we were walking in the street and we like saw one.
Yeah.
And then one of the people with us was like, "I like your Halloween costume."
And that person was like, "This is my persona, honey." Yeah. Yeah, so furries are people who, and I'm being very, very serious. Right, that's right. That's right. Well, they're persona animal, but which is their persona. So these are people. It's a spectrum. So there are some people who just like to put on a tail or cat ears and call it a day. But there are others who believe. They believe that they are just so, drawn to dogs. And they really feel that dog energy and they connect with the dog canine energy that maybe they're part dog. Or maybe they're part fairy. Those are called otherkins. So,
I want to share something.
yes, go ahead. If we can all turn I know. Let's take a minute to let this sink in. But if we can all turn our attention right over here.
What you want to share? I used to work with a school district, and I have witnessed children abuse this and take advantage of it. And I saw and I witnessed one of the children. She was in high school. She came to school complaining that her family is not respecting her wishes to be a hay after she cut her hair. And actually, they took her from the house.
Yes.
They called the child protection and they put her in a shelter.
Yeah.
And they showered her with money, gift cards, everything that she needs, and she got all the attention in the world. Just because my family doesn't accept me as a hay. And I believe it's literally, I don't need a certification or being a psychiatrist to know that she's not he. She's not he at all. But it's how
she's working in the system
of seeking attention or screaming, "I'm here."
Yes. And you're absolutely right. We don't need a degree to be able to see this. I have conversations like this with My father, who's a psychiatrist, who would also agree with that statement that there are people who know how to work the system to get attention. Perhaps there are other issues happening. Perhaps they really don't believe that they're a tiger or a bear, but look at all the attention that I can get by doing so. Now you might be thinking, okay, so this might happen in certain schools and certain people are getting attention, but is this really that big of a deal? I mean, it's not like these things are in national stores all around the world right in your face.
It is actually in work right now.
Yeah.
It is, like I have coworkers that went from a H to an E, and I have coworkers.
The gay BCs. We're gonna read from the gay BCs in just a minute. So, I was in Target. I was in Come on, Target. I made the mistake of going to Target in June. In June, right. I should have skipped the whole month of June. Now, why June? What's the problem with June? Someone tell me. Pride Month. Pride Month.
Also Coptic Day, but like.
We were looking for a gift for a kid in our church who just turned 4. And because I prefer books over screens, I'm like, let's go look at the books, guys. Let's pick something out. And this time it's my oldest son, my 17-year-old. He's like, Mom. And I'm like, a what? I'm like, you know what? Let's put this back. Paw Patrol's over here, and let's go. But I went back later without the family, to buy the gay BCs. This book, just to be clear, was in Target, in the shelf within easy reach of little kids, next to other similar little kid books. How old, just by looking at this, would you say this book would be for? Like what age range? Toddlers, 3, 4. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but
I'm not even joking, it's a seasonal item.
Is it still stuff?
No, it's seasonal.
it is seasonal.
It's February, now it's Black History Month. You gotta stand up for your faith.
B is for bi.
Let's check it.
You can shout it out loud. I like more than one gender, and that makes me proud.
Wait, how does it sound to be? This book is hard.
C is for coming out. Coming out, like you're coming out of the closet. You're ready to share what you feel deep inside. It's okay to be scared. Now, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but I just highlighted just a high-level overview. Oh, this one's my favorite. N is for non-binary. The gender binary doesn't apply to who you are, how you feel, and how you identify. Those are some pretty big words for a toddler. And then this is the last one, and I promise I'm done. T is for trans. It's a brave step to take to live as the gender you know is innate.
That one was easy for
There's some adults I know that might not even know what the word innate means. The point is, we are truly living in a time where there are attacks on our youth, attacks on our faith. And so we need to realize this and also show pity and mercy and love to those who can't seem to discern their right hand from their left. And also not to forget that we are in need of that same mercy. We're not any better than anyone else. And that through service, we are also being served. Yes.
I don't think I teach her how to do it.
I was just thinking that I do think about this a lot, and it's not, because we're focusing on this gender dysphoria. Prevalence,
Just for now, because I'm talking about it tomorrow.
It's a big issue, but these are similar things are constantly happening in different ways and over time and over generations. Like whatever topic you pick music. And if you listen to something from the 1950s and you listen to something from now, it's loaded with curse words, it's loaded with sexual references, right? So that's always like infiltrating in the mind. That was my generation in the 90s, right? And like when that was coming out. And then as like it continued, you had the development of online streaming services. So like you take Netflix for an example. And you think about what that does to your mind and your personality. You're creating a thing where you are in control. You're picking. I don't like it, I change it, and I change it quick. Yeah. As opposed to if you compare to TV back in the 80s, whatever, it was just few things on the TV, and you had to pick, and you had to learn to tolerate what was provided and work with what you have. But that's like slowly going away over generations because it's a control and like less tolerance. And so we're society, and just through this and through all these different things, it's like impacting us slowly and changing our personalities to be like, we need to feel in control, and when that doesn't happen, we can get like a huge like frustration, Right.
That's so true. So what do you see as a good step forward?
Me?
Yeah.
That's a hard question.
or anyone else. You're absolutely right.
I'm just trying to build aware. I think my first step is being aware of it and how it's like impacting me, right? Because I even like, even it doesn't matter what happens, even if it's like a flight disturbance, we can't tolerate that anymore. So we're being very impacted, and then so we have to focus on ourselves. Like it goes back to like where we're pointing the finger, because then when we're frustrated and how we deal with others, then we like are diffusing all that constantly. And even like the presence of social media, it's just teaching us like, okay, go to the next country, pick the next outfit, pick the next it's too much. And even like the news is changing, where when you watch the news, like the rate of like the time of like how long they're bringing the next subject up, like we don't take time anymore. It's now like boom, 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 and so like you're constantly being like
bombarded
all through all different various like different sources that are impacting how we think, and it causes so much anxiety, so much chaos, so much confusion. So it's we have to be vigilant, we have to be aware.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for sharing that and bringing that perspective, that we are being bombarded with so many things, that things are chipping away, that music from the 1970s and 50s and 60s is different than what we hear now. Things are so much more fast-paced, and that's why I think having meetings like this, where you're anchoring, when you look at your week and you're providing certain key anchoring activities that allow you to pause and to think and to reflect. It could be morning prayer, it could be evening screen-free time. That will help build our resilience as we continue to face this onslaught of stuff, and it's all big stuff coming from all angles. Yes.
Well, I think as servants, it helps to understand like that society, that stuff not only impacts us, but it impacts the way kids are, kids function, right? Yeah. Whether it's in the classroom, in Sunday school, in service, they're not, like they're so used to that fast pace that they're often not critically thinking about what they're absorbing.
Right.
They're not even questioning the things they're watching.
Yeah.
It's all kind of just being fed to them. And so when they're sitting in Sunday school, like bored or this or that, you know, like how are we presenting information to help them absorb what they're getting, and how are we kind of balancing what we're providing so they can handle?
Yeah, absolutely. All good things to think about. It definitely switches up how we do things. To end, because I think I've gone over time.
It's fine.
Going back to, you know, I'm a big believer that at the end of the day, it's the grace of God, God's mercy. We do what we can to the extent that we can, and He sees our heart, He sees our will, He sees our intentions, and He'll cover and protect and provide, while we keep things in mind that we can't serve today the way that our servants and our servants' served us back then, to incorporate different things today, knowing what youth are having to deal with and how they're learning. But just know that whatever your service is, and we touched on this earlier, there is that intentional side of your service, and then there is the unintentional. There are people who are unintentionally served by you making the decision to show up, by you making the decision to come, by you making the decision to be here even if you didn't want to be here. 3,000 years later, we're still here talking about Jonah. We don't know the impact of your service. Just like the sailors. Now we know that they were not the intended audience, but they were unintentionally served in a moment of Jonah's disservice. That's the beauty. God can even take a situation like that and use it for good. We know they were not God's people because when they were afraid, the Bible says each one cried out to his God. So we know that they didn't start out being believers in God, but after their interaction with Jonah, what happened? Each one cried to his own God at first, and then after the interaction with Jonah, they worshipped. They worshipped, took vows, offered sacrifices. So the last thing to keep in mind in our service is, who are we encountering along the way? And never underestimate the power of a kind word, a smile, and all that you do, because we simply don't know all the people that you impact and that you will go on to impact. And may God continue to work in us, and through us, and with us for the glory of His kingdom. Glory be to God forever. Thank you all. Thank you.
God willing, next month, it will be on March 1st. We are trying to have a set date, a set Saturday of every month, which will be the second Saturday of the month. But next month, Abuna has a speaker who will be just available on that first Saturday, which will be March 1st. So more details are coming.